The train's whistle wailed into the frozen air, a sound that carried like a warning across the plains. Steam bellowed white against the dimming sky as the iron beast groaned, its wheels biting into the tracks. The platform at Dry Creek Station was a lonely one, more wood than stone, more wind than warmth. By the time the train pulled away, scattering soot into the snow-tinged air, only a handful of souls remained. Drifters, ranch hands, men looking for trouble where the cold offered none. And her. She stood alone at the far end of the platform, a young woman with skin pale as the frost in the lantern light, dark hair wild about her face, black silk shoes sinking into slush. Her dress, once fine, was a washed-out shade of ivory, embroidered with faint patterns of red thread, but it was not made for this country, not for this weather. A valise, battered and tied with fraying cord, rested at her feet. No one looked at it, they looked at her. Her eyes lowered, shoulders hunched inward as though she could fold herself out of sight. But the men saw her, and that was enough. Their laughter was thick with whiskey, their words soaked in cruelty. "Left her, did he?" One jeered, breath fogging in the cold. "Bride off the ship, no husband to claim her." Another spat on the wood near her shoes. "Ain't worth $1 now." The wind cut sharper, carrying their laughter across the emptiness. She clutched her valise as if it were her last tether. From the opposite end of the platform came the sound of small boots. 2 children, a boy and a girl, twins, their faces red with cold, mittens patched, coats buttoned tight. They held hands, stepping carefully along the boards. Their father walked behind them, tall, broad-shouldered, a man whose silence weighed heavier than words. His coat was wool, his hat low, his dark hair touched by the frost of early winter. The children stopped suddenly. Their eyes, so alike it was like looking into 2 mirrors, fixed on the woman abandoned at the far end. The girl tugged at her brother's sleeve, then pointed with a mittened hand. Her voice rang out, high and certain in the brittle air. "Papa," she said. "She is our mama." The boy nodded, solemn, as if he too had seen truth in her. "Yes, Papa. She's our mama." Their father's step slowed. Alex Carter had buried his wife 3 winters past, the earth frozen so hard they'd broken shovels to make her grave. Since then, he'd lived in a silence broken only by the needs of these 2. He had never thought to hear such words again. His eyes narrowed, but not at the children. He followed their gaze and saw the woman. Saw her thin arms trembling against the cold. Saw the way she fought not to meet the eyes of the men circling closer. Saw fear carved into her every line, and shame like a brand burned across her lowered face. The twins did not move. Their small boots froze to the boards as the men drew nearer to her. Alex shifted his weight forward, his hands steady at his sides. He did not speak, not yet. "Don't reckon you understand a word we're sayin', do ya?" One of the men barked at her. He reached out and caught the sleeve of her dress. The fabric strained. She flinched back, lips parting but no sound coming. Alex moved then. His boots struck the boards with measured weight, each step loud enough to draw the men's eyes. His shadow stretched long in the lantern glow. The twins followed, holding fast to each other, never letting go. The man clutching her sleeve looked up, sneer faltering at the sight of Alex's shoulders, the set of his jaw. Alex said nothing. His silence was its own kind of warning. "What's it to you, Carter?" One of them muttered, though his voice thinned. "She's nothin' but freight left behind." Alex's hand came down, not on the man, but on the woman's valise. He lifted it, the cord snapping loose, contents shifting within. He set it firmly into the crook of his arm. With the other hand, he gestured toward the wagon hitched at the road, snow crusting its wheels. The children didn't hesitate. They darted forward, the girl clutching the woman's hand, the boy tugging at her sleeve. Her eyes widened, panic and disbelief colliding with their innocent certainty. "Come," Ruthie whispered. "You'll freeze." She tried to resist, but her knees buckled, too cold, too spent. Samuel braced himself, only 7, yet his small strength anchored her enough to move. Together, the twins pulled her toward the wagon. The men muttered, some cursing, but Alex's presence loomed like stone. When one took a step forward, Alex's eyes met his, and the man faltered. It was not anger in Alex's gaze, but something heavier, older, grief forged into resolve. None of them wanted to test it. He lifted her onto the wagon himself, hands firm but careful. She drew in breath sharp as the air, the shock of being touched with no cruelty behind it. The twins scrambled in beside her, one on each side, as though she belonged there by right. Alex climbed onto the bench, reins in hand. The mare stamped against the cold, breath steaming. He gave a single click of his tongue, and the wagon lurched forward. Behind them, the men shouted after, but the wind drowned their voices, scattering them across the prairie night. The station lanterns faded, swallowed by darkness. Snow fell in thin sheets, dusting the wagon boards, clinging to the woman's hair. She sat rigid, hands gripping the edges of the seat. The twins pressed close, their small shoulders leaning into her sides. Alex drove with eyes fixed ahead, jaw tight. The road stretched long, marked by ruts frozen hard, flanked by fields of brittle grass poking through snow. His silence filled the wagon, but it was not empty. It held weight, the weight of decision, of unspoken promise. The woman lowered her gaze, chest rising with shallow breaths. She whispered something, words soft and quick, syllables not of this land. Neither Alex nor the children understood, but they heard the tremor in it, the brokenness. Ruthie, without hesitation, slipped her mittened hand into hers and squeezed. The woman's eyes filled, though no tears spilled. Not yet. The wagon wheels struck a rut, jarring them all. Alex steadied the reins, but his gaze flicked once to her. He saw her thin frame wrapped in silk unsuited for the cold, her lips bluish, her shoes sodden. Without a word, he shrugged off his coat and swung it around her shoulders. She stiffened, startled. Then, slowly, she pulled it tighter, burying herself in its rough wool. The children leaned closer into the folds, making a cocoon of warmth where moments before there had been only shivering silence. The road bent toward the Carter Ranch, a dark line of fencing half buried in snow. The house waited, smoke barely curling from the chimney, lantern light a flicker in the window. It was not much, a cabin raised by hands now gone, patched and worn by storms, but it was shelter. The mare pulled to a stop before the porch. Alex climbed down, boots crunching on frost. He lifted the twins one by one, then turned to the woman. She hesitated, gripping the coat as though letting go would strip her bare again. Alex reached, not forcing, only offering. After a breath, she placed her hand in his, and he steadied her to the ground. The children scurried up the steps, calling for fire, for stew left simmering. The woman lingered, snow swirling around her skirts. She looked back once, toward the darkness where the train had gone, where men's laughter had threatened to consume her. Then forward, to the cabin door, where warmth and strange belonging waited. Alex opened it for her. His face was unreadable, but his eyes, shadowed, lined with loss, held something that told her she was not freight, not discarded. Not here. Inside, the air smelled of wood smoke and broth. The fire crackled low, shadows dancing across rough boards. She stepped across the threshold, her soaked shoes squeaking faintly. The twins dragged her toward the hearth, eager, as if they had found what they had long been missing. Alex set her valise by the wall. He did not pry. He simply placed it where it would not be trampled, and then turned to the stove, ladling stew into bowls. His silence filled the room again, but it no longer felt as cold. The woman lowered herself onto the hearth rug, the twins pressing to her sides. They chattered softly, their words tumbling over each other, filling the spaces she could not yet answer. She listened, her hand resting atop Ruthie's hair, her fingers brushing Samuel's sleeve. For the first time since the train pulled away, she breathed without trembling. Alex glanced over once, watching them in the firelight, the fragile shape of something new, forming where none of them had expected. His jaw set, as though he had made a choice even he did not fully understand. Outside, the wind rose, sweeping across the frozen plains. Wolves howled somewhere distant, their voices carried on the storm. The night was not safe, not in this land, not for those who walked it alone. But within the cabin, warmth grew. And as the fire cracked, the woman turned her head, eyes catching Alex, just once across the dim. In that brief meeting, his steady, hers searching, the weight of what was begun pressed into the air. The twins curled against her, heavy with sleep, their breaths steady. Alex rose, stepped to the door, and looked out across the snow. He knew shadows would not leave them be. Men did not surrender what they claimed, not without trying to take it back. The wind slammed against the walls. He shut the door, set the bar across it, and the lantern flame wavered. In the silence that followed, the truth settled like frost. This was no rescue finished. It was only the beginning. The first night passed in fragments of silence and shallow rest. The storm pressed against the cabin walls, the wind clawing like a beast that longed to come in. Within, the fire burned low, casting shifting shapes along the beams. The twins slept in their loft above, their whispers finally quieting into steady breaths. Alex had sat long by the door, rifle leaning against his knee, though no rider approached. The woman, Rulin, lay near the hearth, wrapped in his coat, her face half-shadowed by her black hair. Though her eyes closed at times, they opened again at each creak, her hand clenching at the quilt as if ready to be torn from warmth. When dawn rose pale over the plains, she still looked like one braced for loss. Morning light leaked into the cabin, pale and sharp against the frost-rimmed window. Alex roused the fire with measured strikes of the poker, the sound breaking the hush. He did not look at her as he moved, but his every gesture spoke of habit, placing kindling with care, shifting the pot of stew to warm again, moving with the ease of one who had learned to live without words. She stirred, her breath catching when she realized she was still inside, still clothed in warmth. Her shoes, still damp, had been set near the fire, soles stiffening in the heat. Her valise leaned against the wall, untouched since his hand had placed it there. She rose slowly, each motion deliberate, her silk sleeves stiff from the night's damp. Alex did not speak. He ladled broth into a bowl and set it on the small table. The smell of onions and venison filled the air, carried with the wood smoke. She lingered where she was, uncertain, until the twins scrambled down the ladder, hair tousled, eyes bright with the mischief of new morning. Ruthie ran straight to her, clutching at her arm as if she had been theirs for years. Samuel was slower, but he smiled shyly, as though secrets had already grown between them. "You sit with us," Ruthie said, tugging her toward the table. Her accent rolled sharp, Western, her tone full of command a child need not justify. Samuel nodded in solemn agreement. Alex made no objection. Rulin allowed herself to be drawn forward, her steps hesitant but obedient to the children's pull. The table was rough, scarred by years of use, its surface worn where Alex's late wife's hands had once cleaned, where Alex's fists had once struck in anger at storms, where the twins had carved letters of their names with a dull knife. Now it held 3 bowls, steam rising. Alex poured one more without looking directly at her. When she sat, he pushed it across with the back of his hand. She whispered something soft in her own tongue before lifting the spoon. The broth was simple, hearty, thicker than anything she had tasted since leaving her homeland. It scalded her tongue, yet the warmth spread through her, her fingers loosening around the wooden spoon. The twins slurped greedily, broth dripping from their chins. Alex ate in silence, gaze low, though once he glanced up to see if she would eat at all. She met his eyes only for an instant before looking down again, heat rising in her cheeks. After, Ruthie fetched her scraps of cloth from a box and pressed them into Rulin's lap. "Make Dolly clothes?" she asked eagerly, certain her new companion must share her games. Rulin blinked at the bright patchwork, threadbare but clean. Her fingers, though stiff, knew the weight of cloth, the feel of needle and thread. She nodded, and Ruthie beamed, already pulling Samuel into her plans. Alex watched from his chair, his expression unreadable. The day unfolded with small, quiet rhythms. Alex worked outside, his axe striking steady into wood, the sound echoing across the snowy fields. Through the small window Rulin watched, the shape of him moving against the pale expanse. He carried himself with a certainty she could not understand, yet it steadied her to see him there. Inside, she sat with the children, her hand sewing crooked stitches into cloth, teaching them the careful way to knot thread. They laughed when her words faltered, but she laughed too, surprised to find the sound still in her throat. By afternoon the storm had passed, leaving the sky wide and blue. Alex returned with wood piled on his shoulder. His breath steamed, his hair damp with sweat despite the cold. He set the load down, brushing snow from his coat. The twins ran to him, clinging to his legs, babbling about Ruland's sewing. He listened, patient, nodding once, then set a piece of wood into the hearth. His gaze flicked to her, pausing only a moment, but it was enough for her to lower her eyes again. As evening fell, shadows stretched long, and the wind rose low and mournful. Alex lit the lanterns, their glow soft against the cabin walls. Supper was bread and stew again, the fare of survival. Ruland offered no complaint, only gratitude in the way she ate slowly, savoring warmth she had nearly lost. The children begged for a story, and when Alex shook his head, Ruthie pressed Ruland's hand instead. Startled, she hesitated. Then she began softly, haltingly, in broken English mixed with words unknown, telling of a red carp that swam up a waterfall and became a dragon. Her voice trembled at first but grew steady, the rhythm carrying her beyond fear. The twins listened, wide-eyed, as if no tale had ever been greater. Alex, though silent, leaned his head against the wall, eyes closing as though lulled by the cadence. Later, when the children slept, Ruland lingered by the fire. Alex returned from checking the barn, snow glittering in his beard. He set the bar across the door and hung his rifle on its peg. She rose quickly, clutching his coat tighter around her shoulders, as though to retreat. But he paused, nodding slightly toward the seat she had left. "Stay warm," he said at last. His first words to her since lifting her from the station. His voice was low, steady, carrying neither command nor invitation, but something between. Her lips parted, a breath caught in her chest. She nodded once and sat again. Alex poured hot water into a cup and placed it near her. She cupped it with both hands, heat seeping into her fingers. Their eyes met, and this time she did not look away at once. There was no softness in his gaze, not yet, but no cruelty either. Only a recognition, as if both knew they bore weight too heavy to speak aloud. That night, she dreamed of the station again, the men's laughter echoing, the hand tearing at her sleeve. She woke with a cry muffled against her sleeve. The fire was low, but Alex sat near the door still, lantern beside him. His rifle rested across his knees. He turned his head slightly at her sound. She froze, shame flooding her face. He said nothing, only stirred the fire back to life. The light grew, chasing shadows, until her trembling eased. She lay down once more, not fully sleeping but no longer drowning in fear. The days that followed shaped themselves into fragile routine. Alex worked in the fields and barn, tending to animals, mending fences half buried in snow. Ruland stayed close to the cabin, learning the rhythm of its walls. She swept the floor with hesitant motions, boiled water, mended torn mittens. The children followed her as though she were a shadow stitched to their own. Each night they begged for another story, and each night she gave one, her words weaving warmth into the cabin's cold corners. Yet always there lingered the hush of something unsettled. Town was not far, and whispers carried. When Alex rode in for supplies, men spoke too loud, women turned away. He heard them but gave no answer. His silence was a shield, but even shields crack. He returned with eyes shadowed, his hand heavy on the reins. The children asked nothing, sensing the weight in him. Ruland, sewing by the fire, saw the set of his jaw and knew without words that danger had not passed. One night, after the children slept, she rose to the door. Snow fell light across the plains, the moon silvering the land. She reached for the latch, heart hammering. The urge to flee pressed on her. Better to vanish than to bring ruin upon this house. She lifted the bar carefully, her breath catching as the wood creaked. The cold air slipped in, stinging her face. But Alex was already there. He stood at the threshold, lantern in hand, as though he had known she would come. His shadow loomed tall against the snow. She froze, shame flooding her. "You won't make it far," he said quietly. His tone was not harsh, only weary. "Cold'll take you before morning." Her hands trembled on the latch. She could not meet his gaze. For a moment she thought he would order her inside, command her like others had. Instead, he stepped back, leaving the choice to her. The silence stretched, broken only by the hiss of snow against the lantern glass. Slowly, she lowered the bar into place again. Her breath came unsteady, but relief curled through it. She turned, still unable to speak, and crossed back to the fire. Alex set the lantern down and sat once more by the door. She wrapped herself in the coat, heart pounding. His trust, that he would let her choose, even to leave, was more binding than any chain could have been. She lay down, eyes burning, but did not sleep. Above, the children whispered in their dreams. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind carried faint howls across the endless dark. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in many weeks, the fear did not swallow her whole. But with the easing of one dread came the rise of another. For shadows, once stirred, do not rest, and in the distance men still spoke her name with claim. The cabin walls could not keep them out forever. The winter deepened, its bite sharper with each dawn, and the Carter ranch bent beneath the weight of snow that drifted higher against the fences. Days shortened, nights stretched long, and inside the cabin a rhythm had been carved. Alex rose before light, kindling fire and breaking ice at the trough. The twins followed him with their chatter, and Rulin wove herself into the fabric of their days with quiet labor. She mended, swept, and listened, her presence no longer as strange to the house as it had been when she first crossed its threshold. Yet even within this fragile peace, shadows stretched, threatening to undo what warmth had begun to take root. The children were the first to ask questions. Ruthie, fearless in her curiosity, tugged at Rulin's sleeve one evening as stew simmered low. "Where's your home?" she asked with the bluntness only a child carried. Samuel hushed her, embarrassed, but his eyes searched for the answer just as much. Rulin faltered, spoon hovering over the pot. The steam rose, carrying scents of venison and onion, and in it her thoughts swam back to another shore, another time. She shook her head, lips pressed thin. "Far," she whispered at last, voice faint, as though the word itself held danger. Ruthie frowned but asked no more. Alex heard, though he gave no sign. He sat near the fire, sharpening a blade against the stone. Sparks of steel whispered in the hush, each stroke steady, unhurried. He had long ago learned that truth revealed itself not by force but by patience, like ice thawing slow under sun. Still, he saw how Rulin's eyes clouded when silence asked more than words, and he knew there were wounds she could not yet unbind. It was on the third Sunday since her arrival that they walked into town together. Supplies had run thin, and Alex would not leave her alone with the twins in case storm or strangers came. The road was lined with drifts that swallowed the wheels to their hubs, but the mare pushed through, Alex steady at the reins. Rulin sat in back with the twins, wrapped in wool, her gaze fixed on the endless white. When the town came into view, its church steeple sharp against gray sky, its row of buildings half buried in frost, she stiffened. The station platform where Alex had found her lay only a mile beyond, and its memory weighed heavy in her chest. Whispers began before they even tied the horse at the post. Men on the saloon porch leaned on rails, eyes narrow, voices low but cutting. "That's Carter," one muttered. "Took in a China woman." The word rolled with scorn, dragged long in the cold air. A woman carrying laundry across the street quickened her pace, clutching her child closer as she passed. Children whispered and giggled, though their mothers hushed them sharply. Alex did not flinch. He guided the twins toward the store, his broad frame parting the street without effort. Rulin followed close, head lowered, heart pounding in her ears. Inside, the air was warmer, thick with dust and spices. Mr. Dobbins, the storekeeper, lifted his head and froze when his eyes met hers. He nodded stiffly to Alex but avoided her gaze, his smile thin. The twins darted between barrels of flour and crates of apples, laughing, their innocence louder than any whisper. Rulin lingered by the door, hands clasped, shrinking from the stares of the few townsfolk inside. Alex gathered what he needed: salt, beans, nails for mending fences, his motions deliberate. The storekeeper's voice carried, just loud enough. "You'll be wantin' to mind yourself, Carter. Folks talk." Alex's eyes rose, calm yet heavy. "Let 'em." He laid coin on the counter. His tone ended the matter, though the weight of unspoken judgment filled the room. On the ride home, Rulin clutched the children close. Her eyes shone with tears unshed, the sting of rejection pressing harder than the cold. Alex glanced back once, his jaw set, but said nothing. When they reached the cabin, she fled inside before the twins had even shaken the snow from their boots. That night, she spoke at last. Her voice came soft, halting, but stronger with each word. She told of the journey that had carried her across an ocean, bound not by choice but by contract. Promises of a husband, a new life, gold pressed into the hands of those who sold her. The man meant to claim her had been Harland Briggs, a foreman of the railroad, broad, cruel, rich enough to buy silence. When she had refused him, he had cast her off like spoiled freight, left her at the station with only the valise and the clothes on her back. She had thought death would claim her before dawn. The firelight painted her face as she spoke, shadows deepening around her eyes. The children listened wide-eyed, not fully understanding but sensing the grief woven into each word. Alex said nothing, though his hands stilled on the rifle he had been cleaning. The steel gleamed red in the glow, and his jaw tightened with every detail. When she finished, silence stretched. The crackle of the fire filled the space between them. Ruthie crawled into Ruland's lap, pressing her small head against her chest. Samuel leaned close too, his arms circling her waist. Their wordless comfort broke her, and tears slipped down her cheeks, hot and unhidden. She did not resist when they clung to her. Alex turned his gaze back to the flames, his eyes dark with thought. Days later, the first sign of danger arrived. A rider came to the ranch, snow crusted thick on his coat. He was a neighbor, wary, shifting in his saddle. "Briggs is lookin'," he said simply. "Word is, he's angry. Said she's his, says you stole her out from under him. He's drinkin' mean, makin' noise about talkin' back what's his." Alex listened, face unreadable, but his silence carried weight. He nodded once. "Thank you." The rider left, hooves muffled in the drifts. Ruland had stood at the doorway, hearing every word. Her face drained of color, her hands tightening around the frame until her knuckles whitened. That night, fear pressed heavier than the storm outside. Ruland sat by the hearth, sewing with trembling hands. The children sensed her unease and clung close, whispering reassurances in their small voices. Alex moved through the cabin with steady purpose, checking shutters, splitting wood, setting tools in order. His silence was no longer absence but preparation. She watched him, heart torn between gratitude and terror. "He will come," she whispered when the children had gone to bed. Her voice cracked under the weight of it. Alex met her gaze across the dim room. His eyes were hard as iron, his voice quiet but certain. "Then let him." The days that followed carried tension like a storm cloud. Alex taught the twins to stack wood, to carry water without spilling, small tasks to keep their hands busy. Ruland mended clothes, baked bread with what flour remained, sang soft songs in her tongue that soothed the children even as fear haunted her. Every creak of the cabin, every shadow moving across the snow, set her heart racing. Alex worked longer. His strength poured into the land as if to fortify against what loomed unseen. One evening, as twilight bled across the plains, Alex showed her how to load the rifle. His hands were steady as he placed it in hers, guiding her grip. She trembled, shaking her head. "I cannot." "You can," he answered simply. His eyes held hers until her breath steadied. She pulled the lever, the click sharp in the hush. He nodded, satisfied, and took it back. It was not a request. It was preparation, a wordless vow that he would not allow her to be helpless again. The twins began to sense the change. Samuel grew quiet, listening at doors, watching the horizon. Ruthie whispered to Ruland at night, asking if the bad men would come. Ruland stroked her hair, unable to promise safety, but promising she would not leave them. Her words bound her tighter to the family than she had ever intended, yet they felt truer than anything she had spoken. Snow thickened, days dimmed, and the horizon grew watchful. On the fourth night after the warning, a sound drifted across the plains, the distant echo of hooves, muffled but steady. Alex rose from his chair, hand closing around his rifle. Ruland froze by the hearth, the children clutching her skirts. The fire burned low, shadows stretching long against the walls. The sound faded, swallowed by the storm, but the message lingered. He was close. Rulin sat in the fire's glow long after the children slept, her eyes fixed on the door. Alex stood near the window, his frame outlined against the frost. For the first time, she saw not just his silence but the weight he bore, the grief of loss, the burden of protecting what little remained. He turned, his gaze meeting hers, and in it she read both promise and peril. The storm outside howled louder, rattling the shutters. Snow lashed the glass, but beneath it she thought she heard another sound, distant but deliberate, the murmur of voices carried on the wind. Her breath caught, and Alex's hand tightened on the rifle. The danger was no longer rumor. It had found their trail. The night of reckoning came with the storm. Snow fell in thick sheets, swirling like ghosts across the endless plains, hammering against the cabin walls as though the wind itself wanted in. Inside, the fire burned low, its glow fighting shadows that gathered in the corners. Alex stood at the window, rifle resting in his grip, shoulders rigid. Rulin sat near the hearth, the twins pressed into her sides, their small hands clutching her sleeves. Every gust of wind felt like a footfall, every creak of the beams a whisper of men outside. Then came the sound, hooves, muffled by snow yet steady, purposeful. Lantern light flickered beyond the drifting white. Shadows took form, growing larger, until torches glowed in the night. Harland Briggs had come, and he had not come alone. The mare in the barn whinnied in fear, stamping against her stall. Alex drew in a slow breath, steadying himself, and turned from the window. His voice was calm though his jaw was iron. "Stay with them," he told Rulin, though his eyes lingered on hers longer than the words required. She nodded, though her chest rose with panic. The children whimpered, clutching tighter, but Alex moved to the door. The thud of boots and the snarl of voices carried clearer now. "Carter!" Harlan's voice bellowed through the storm, thick with whiskey and rage. "Send her out. She's mine, and you damn well know it." Alex lifted the bar, the wood groaning, and pulled the door open. Cold rushed in like a living thing, stinging his face. Snow swirled around him, lantern light catching on the barrels of rifles beyond. Harlan stood at their head, coat flapping open, hat jammed low, his eyes red and vicious. Behind him, 4 men shifted, their torches hissing in the snow, their hands twitching near holsters. Alex stepped onto the porch, rifle steady in his hands but lowered. He spoke with no tremor. "She ain't yours." Harlan laughed, a sound more like a snarl. "Bought her fair. She's mine to keep or cast off as I please." He took a step forward, torchlight painting his face. "You think you can shame me, Carter? You think you can take what I paid for?" Alex's eyes were dark as coal. "She's not a thing to be owned." His voice carried above the storm, a flat truth that cut through the sneers. One of the men shifted, raising his rifle. Alex's own lifted like lightning, aimed without tremor. The air tightened. Snow hissed against the porch roof. No one breathed. Then, before the first shot, the door opened behind him. Rulin stepped out, coat clutched around her shoulders, hair whipping in the wind. The twins cried out inside, but she did not falter. She moved to Alex's side, her small frame dwarfed by his, yet her presence struck like a flame against the night. Her voice trembled but did not break. "I am not yours, Harland. Not now, not ever." The men jeered, but Harlan's face twisted in rage, his pride stung deeper than any wound. "You'll pay for that," he spat. With a growl, he lunged forward, drawing the knife from his belt. The torches flared, snow scattering in sparks. Gunfire cracked. Alex's shot split the night, the torch of the nearest man tumbling into the snow. Horses reared, men shouted. Rulin gasped, clutching Alex's coat as the fight erupted. Bullets tore through the storm, sparks flying from the porch rails. Alex fired again, one man falling with a cry that vanished into the wind. Harlan's knife flashed, and suddenly he was on the porch, slamming into Alex, both men crashing against the wood. The rifle clattered from Alex's hand. They grappled, the knife slashing Alex's strength against Harlan's fury. Snow swirled around them, coating their coats, their breath rising in steam. Rulin stood frozen, her hands trembling, until her eyes fell on the rifle half buried in snow. She ran, feet slipping, hands clutching the frozen wood. Lifting it burned her arms, but she turned, heart pounding, and raised it toward the men. Her voice cracked the night, fierce though her body shook. "Leave us!" The torches wavered, the men hesitating at the sight of her small frame braced against the storm, defiance blazing in her eyes. The children cried from within the cabin, their voices shrill with fear. Harlan snarled, forcing Alex back against the rail, knife pressing close. Alex, teeth gritted, his hands straining to hold the blade at bay. Ruland's hands tightened on the rifle. She fired, not into flesh, but into the air, the shot roaring like thunder. Horses screamed, torches toppled into snow, men cursed and stumbled back. The storm swallowed their cries. For a heartbeat, silence followed. Then Alex roared, twisting with a surge of strength, knocking the knife from Harlan's grip. It clattered into the snow. With one final heave, Alex drove him down, pinning him hard against the boards. Harlan gasped, face twisted in rage and humiliation, the fight drained from him at last. The other men, shaken, dragged him up, muttering curses. Their torches hissed as they smothered them in snow. They dared not meet Alex's eyes, nor Ruland's, who still held the rifle steady though her arms quaked. Harlan spat blood into the snow, but when he saw the barrel pointed toward him, his courage faltered. With a final glare, he stumbled back to his horse. The storm swallowed them as they fled, their shadows dissolving into white. Only the howl of the wind remained. Alex stood breathing hard, snow clinging to his beard, his chest heaving. Ruland lowered the rifle, her hands giving out, and it tumbled into the snow. He caught her arm as she swayed, steadying her. Their eyes met in the storm's hush, and in that gaze lived something beyond survival, something forged in fire and fear, something that would not be broken. The twins burst from the cabin, tears streaking their cheeks, their voices crying for her, not for him. They clung to Ruland's skirts, burying their faces, whispering again and again the words that had first bound them, "You're our mama." She bent, pulling them close, her tears mingling with theirs, not of terror now but of relief. Alex stood over them, silent, his hand resting firm on her shoulder. Together they stepped back inside, shutting out the storm. The fire burned low, but its glow filled the cabin with fragile peace. Alex sank into his chair, bruised but alive, while Ruland gathered the children into her lap. They would not let go of her, and she did not try to let them. Her heart thundered, but for the first time it beat not with fear but with belonging. Outside, the storm raged, but within, warmth had taken hold. Alex watched her in the firelight, her hair wild, her face streaked with tears, the twins curled safe against her. His silence carried more than words could. In it lived the vow of a man who had chosen, and the unspoken truth of a woman who had found, against all odds, a home. The wind slammed once more against the walls, rattling the shutters, but it could not enter. And though the night stretched long, dawn was coming, and with it a new life neither had dared to imagine.